don't think we need to do that. I see everybody that I know on here. Is there any attendees, John, that are new to their positions, or Ryan? Everybody, yeah, that's what I thought. So John wants to start out with telling us how we conduct virtual meetings. So go ahead and do that.
Okay. So you may have seen some of these slides the same at your August meeting. To reduce background noise, we ask you to be muted when we can, but obviously the intent of the meeting is to include you. So if you need to get the attention of Chair Rogers or myself in my support role, you can use the hand raising feature. Now is a good time to practice that. What you want to do is open your panelist button, your participant button, excuse me, if you're a panelist. You'll be able to click on that. And then there's a little 3 dots and you can say raise hand. And I can see a few folks who are starting to do that. You can put your hands back down. We'll use that feature when it's time to vote on the meeting minutes, but it's a good way to get either Chair Rogers' attention or mine if you have questions or issues. So some of you are demonstrating your proficiency. You can also lower your hand in the same way. We have a chat box that some folks are starting to use to say good evening. You can use your comments there. And just to give you lots of options, we also have a question and answer function that is available for both the panelists and the attendees. So those are the key things. If your video freezes, you have technical problems, don't panic. The oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling. You can leave the meeting and come back in and rejoin us. I'm going to pause for a moment and direct your attention to the chat. We have a closed captioning service available. So you can click there if you need to rely on closed captions. Some of our other meeting tips. We will have presentations throughout the meeting, presentations that our speakers have provided, and we'll be putting those up on the screen just as I'm doing now. Those presentations are generally also on the ACT website. You can hide the speaker. You have lots of choices for looking at videos of people. If you prefer to the slides, you can look at just the speaker of the moment. You can look at the thumbnail with all of the gallery. You are not, as a member of the ACT, that makes you an attendee or panelist. You don't have to share your video, but it does help us have some sense of community here as we attend this meeting and participate. So we recommend in that spirit to have both the participant and chat panels open so that you can follow along and see what people are doing. I want to remind you that we are recording this and the recording will be posted. The listing will be available on the ACT webpage and it'll be hosted, I believe, on the YouTube channel. And as the last bullet says, we're all learning. We're probably better at this than we were 2 months ago, but there are still things to get used to, so we appreciate your patience. Chair Rogers, those were my technical support comments. Is there anything else you'd like me to address before you host the welcome and introductions?
No, John, that's fine. And we also did the welcome and introductions. You were introduced. I don't think we need any others. So why don't we go right to public comment? Do you have anyone signed up?
Well, if you'd like, do you want folks to introduce themselves or just rely on their thumbnails here on the screen?
As far as what? Voting, you mean?
I don't know how you like to run the meeting. Would you like people to say hello or just skip that?
Let's skip it. We know each other. That's why I said we all know each other. We've worked together for a good part of almost 2 years now. So that's why I was asking if there's any new ones, and no, there isn't any new ones. So we can jump right over to public comment. Is there anyone who signed up for public comment?
I have one notice, and I'll just remind everybody, we will welcome now the attendees. If they would like to speak, they can use the hand raising function to make comments, once we unmute you and say go, I'm going to be keeping the timer for 2 minutes. And if there are folks who have dialed in on the phone, they would use *9 in order to raise their hand. And here on the back end, the staff will be able to see that. And then when we call on you, you would use *6 to unmute yourself. So if you've used your phone audio, that's the technique. So I see here a hand raised, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Savas has his hand raised.
Paul, this is for the public. Do you have a public comment, or do you want to make it later?
Well, no, I just wanted to tip John off that Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson is in the attendees list. If you could pull her over into the panelist. That was all I had. It wasn't a comment.
Thank you, Paul, for monitoring that. I appreciate it very much.
Also, the chat is disabled for attendees, and so the link to the captioning isn't shown to them.
Well, that's an interesting conundrum. I'm gonna ask, let's see, why isn't the chat showing to attendees? I'm gonna try to copy that comment. Excuse me just a second while I put this. I have reposted the captioning link, and I have posted it for both panelists and attendees. So I've tried that again. Okay, I'm getting feedback that it has posted now. So if you put something in the chat, you'll notice that there is a choice of the audience, and the default, I believe, is all panelists. But you can change the box so that the comment goes to both panelists and attendees. Okay, now that we've squared that, let me look for raised hands for anybody who would like to comment. I don't see any right now. I had an email in advance from an individual who wanted to provide testimony, but I'm not seeing that here. So, Mr. Chair, I believe we have offered the floor, and we don't seem to have any.
All right, thank you very much. Some administrative things. First, we have approval of the meeting minutes from August 3rd. Everyone has had an opportunity to review those. Can we have a motion to approve in a second, please?
Motion to move.
I'll second that, Denny.
So I have a comment in the supplemental notes. The link to the draft equity framework doesn't work.
Okay.
So if somebody can fix that before the minutes are, or when the minutes are approved.
Are you suggesting that you want it fixed and then you review it and then we come back to the minutes? Is that what you're saying?
No, it just needs to be fixed because right now it just doesn't work. And so there's no context.
But John or Ryan, can you accomplish that so it is fixed?
Yes, we'll make sure that the minutes are fixed, make sure that link is accurate, and we'll reload them to the final version. When we reload it, we'll have that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for noticing that. We did have a motion. We do have a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Okay, they do pass. There's two other items of administration. I'll just quickly introduce them and turn it back to John. One of them is the infamous training that you're going to hear about we have to do. And the other one is an insurance form. So John, do you want to cover those?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. You've received some emails from me about completing this training that is required of all ACT members and other boards and volunteers around the state. I tried my best to give you an email with clear instructions. We'd encourage you to complete that as soon as possible, and we'll send you reminders leading up to the December meeting. The other topic is an insurance form, and you'll get an email from me later this week. It's a pretty simple form that helps us acquire the appropriate amount of insurance for our volunteers for the policy that we provide for anybody who's serving ODOT as an official. So that should be a pretty easy email for you to receive and fill out when you get it later this week.
Thank you, John. And you're good. Would you mind sending out the link again to the training in case somebody's lost it in their emails?
Absolutely. We'll provide as many reminders as is necessary.
Great. Thank you, John. So I think that's all administrative items. Unless, Ryan, do you have anything? Shake your head. Nope.
No,
All right.
I don't have anything additional.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're a little bit ahead, but that's good because one administrative thing is that folks from Hood River Bridge specifically would like to say a few minutes, and Ryan has developed a little bit of time at the end so that they can have an opportunity to do that. I suspect it's a 5 to 10 minute presentation. We put them off twice, unfortunately, with other business that we've been involved in. So we are trying to put them into the agenda tonight. So we'll quickly then move to Brendan Finn. He's going to talk about congestion relief and funding strategy. And Brendan, before you come on and say things, you can hear me. If you'd answer a couple of things, hopefully in your presentation. One, there's a call for a recommendation to OTC by December 1st. We don't meet again until December 5th. So you might want to cover how we're supposed to do that. I'm also curious, and hopefully you can cover it, how our friends in Hood River and areas outside the urban area mobility office will be able to have any interaction in this, and how we as R1 Act members and stakeholders will be involved. So hopefully during your presentation, again, how will we be involved as stakeholders? How are we going to communicate by the 1st if we don't meet till the 5th? And how are our friends in Hood River and areas outside the urban mobility area, how are they going to be able to participate? So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Chairman Rogers, members of the commission. Good evening. For the record, I'm Brendan Finn, the Director of the Urban Mobility Oregon Department of Transportation. Appreciate you giving me a few minutes on the agenda this evening to talk about the comprehensive congestion management plan. And first, Mr. Chairman, I will address those questions and kind of give a head nod to the letter that was written to the Oregon Transportation Commission by the Region 1 Act and the response letter that I know that went into your packets. I talked to Chair Van Brocklin at length about that response, and he wanted me to convey to the group tonight that he wants to move quickly on this. People have waited too long. He wanted to have actions, not words. That's what I'm here to talk about tonight. So this plan and the efforts that we're going to be putting forward, that we're obviously going to be looping back to everyone, is kind of reflective of the urgency that Chair Van Brocklin and members of his colleagues on the commission felt that's there, that we need to act now to get something going, because timing is critical. So that being said, Mr. Chair, how do we solicit input on a plan before the next time that you meet? We intend to be in contact with every member through staff previous to that meeting, and we're going to gain input. One of the things that we will admit now is that we don't have the financial and implementation plan figured out yet. It's not quite on the back of a napkin, but we still have a long way to go. It's only been about a week and a half since we've been at it. So just for the edification of the rest of the commission, the OTC, and then subsequently the Joint Commission on Transportation for the Oregon State Legislature did direct us to implementing this plan and coming back with a financial plan regarding its implementation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the map. And then again, to your point, we'll directly reach out to our friends in Hood River to make sure that they're giving their input in and are fully apprised of what's going on, because one thing that we know is that this system and this plan affects the entire state. And so jumping in on that, this map represents some big projects and some things that have been done throughout the region on state facilities. A lot of this work has been led by Administrator Winsheimer, and a lot of this has been directed through House Bill 2017 on the mega projects. One of the things that we've been trying to articulate as best we can is that all of these pieces are part of a system. Sometimes these projects get taken in isolation. People get concentrated on each one of them, but they all relate to each other, and their implementation, each of these creates a system where we can manage congestion and increase mobility around the region, which again is of statewide significance. But these projects are also very much of local significance, and that's something that is very much not lost on us or the Oregon Transportation Commission. That's the reason why they created the Urban Mobility Office, to be more deliberate, to be more intentional about these projects and their impacts on communities. So we're gearing up on that. We're 7 months old now. So we feel like we've made a lot of headway working with our regional partners on how these projects can be successful, not only to the communities that are adjacent to them, but how this system works as a whole. So this map there's a lot under it. There's a lot going on. I'm not going to go into detail on it, although I'm going to be happy to answer any detailed questions that members of the commission may have. This obviously highlights some of the HB 2017 projects, mega projects, the Rose Quarter project, the Highway 217 project, and the I-205 project, as well as new, but this was not part of HB 2017, the Interstate Bridge Replacement Office, which the Urban Mobility Office has been engaged in with our partners from Southwest Washington and WashDOT. That process is moving along quickly and swiftly to get that going. The legislature and the Bi-State Committee has given some clear direction to both the DOTs to work with the local community to get this project up and running, but to reflect the values and the needs of our community. So with that, Mr. Chair, I wanted to leave most of the time to answering questions. I think you have Lucinda coming on after me, who's the toll program director within the Urban Mobility Office. We obviously see the toll program as key to the management of the entire system and the financial feasibility of these projects. So I know you're going to be having some time with her, so I won't go too much into depth about that program. I sat with many members of this commission on the value pricing committee that was created through HB 2017. So I've heard a lot of the concerns, but also hopes of members here on what this system can provide. It's finally starting to come to fruition. So we are going to be reporting back to the commission, the Oregon Transportation Commission, by December 1st, where we are on the implementation of this plan and its financing. So with that, Mr. Chair, I don't want to take up too much airspace. Like I said, I'd rather answer questions from the commission, comments, feedback, criticisms, and things that we're missing. One thing I would like to say before I turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, is that this is a work in progress. This is going to be adapting based on lots of different factors that we all know, elections and so forth, that we're going to be kind of catering to make sure that this plan, again, considers how we can manage this system that we have the best we can to manage congestion and increase mobility around the region. So with that, I'll stand down, Mr. Chair, and happy to answer any questions that members may have.
And just before we take questions, so that I'm clear, you're going to reach out, or somebody's going to reach out to all the members here. Does that include our friends in Hood River? Anybody's on this committee, they'll be approached. And how about our friends in Clackamas County who may not be on this committee, but are in the commute shed? Is there any thoughts on that? I know Mr. Savas has brought that up a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy November for us, Mr. Chair. We're going to be out hitting the streets. We've been showing up in all kinds of different places around the region to talk about what we're doing specifically around the toll program. Excuse me. But now we're going to be going around and talking about the implementation of this entire system, because we need all of it to for this system to work. So the answer is yes, Mr. Chair. We'll be reaching out not only to everyone on the commission, but also everyone in the, as you said, I like that, the commute shed.
Thank you. John, are you going to help me facilitate whose hand's raised?
Yes, so far, let's see, I've got two hands. So
Could you
Commissioner
call in
Saba.
order? Yeah, please, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan, for your presentation. Specifically on the map that we're looking at, as you mentioned in the introduction of this map, that these were where the big projects were. And I think some of these projects you're referring to are probably included in the Metro Transportation Measure, I'm gathering, because some of these otherwise don't have any big project plan for them. And with that, in that regard, as far as Clackamas County, two projects in the tier 1 is the Sunrise and the C2C, which seem to be absent from the map. If that is the criteria that you kind of alluded to, so I'm just curious as to why they're not there. And I want to highlight one thing for everyone on the heels of this forest fire issue we did, is that we certainly learned in Clackamas County on our tiny roads coming from the rural area into the urban area, in a case of an emergency, that some of our roads are so small, and an otherwise 20-minute trip took some people over 5 hours to commute. So Highway 212 is the escape route in the event of Cascadia. I just want to point that out, and having a bottleneck right there in the middle of our urban area on the east side, from three or 6 lanes to 2 lanes, is not going to work in an emergency. So if the whole western region wants to head out Highway 212, it'll be insanely dysfunctional.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, should I respond?
Yeah, if there's a response. Paul, did you want a response?
Yeah, just clarify why C2C and 212 aren't there if the criteria is big projects.
Great, thank you.
Well, I think a whole part of having these conversations, being here tonight, we're obviously just rolling this out now, is one of the things we say in the Urban Mobility Office is the process is the project. This is part of the process. It's being here, it's talking to you, it's understanding what's happening in the communities that you all represent, and then making changes and adapting to them. So I hear you loud and clear, Commissioner. I know we've had an introductory discussion about that, and we're going to have plenty more about how this map is going to change and how it reflects things that are happening, in our state, in our region now, that are affecting how we get from A to B and how we're mobile around the region. So I'll just thank you. That's something that we're now going to be taking a look at, and appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan. I just want to clarify, I'm not advocating that any of these roads be tolled, by the way.
Got it. Well, if you remember, I sat next to you during that advisory committee, so we go back on that issue.
Yes, sir, we do. Thank you.
Who's next, John?
Next, you have Hal Hagedorn.
Brendan, thanks for this map. I think it's really helpful to sort of see the bigger picture and how all these projects fit together. Can you just talk briefly about what percentage of this entire plan is funded and what still remains? And then sort of a timeline for the build out of these projects?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Hal. It's a good question. Appreciate it. And so with the projects right now, we know we have the full funding for, as far as the HB 2017 projects are concerned. Obviously, the Metro Bond Measure projects, we'll see what happens in a month, and we'll be reacting to that. The HB 2017 projects are 217 and Rose Quarter are fully funded. 205 is funded through design, which we're now at the 60% threshold out for concurrent review of those designs right now. I think the commission has said move forward on all of these. I do have a kind of a tentative timeline that you can see that's probably going to change as we spend these next 2 months really going to school on how we can fund the entire system. I guess I would say as soon as possible, but we know that's will require some work. So that's the current funding scale for each one of the projects. Obviously, we're looking at how do we balance all of that out through the toll program and existing funds to see if we can to fund everything. That's what the OTC has told us to do. Take a comprehensive look. Don't look at project by project, and come back to us with a plan on implementing this entire vision and strategy.
Can you just clarify? So the Rose Quarter project is fully funded, because I was under the impression that it was. So the 785 is in entirety is funded.
Yeah, the cost to complete came in well over, as we know. We are currently still at about 15% design of that project. So there's going to be a gap. That's another thing we need to figure out. I guess I should have said how would be more appropriate is that the legislature for the first cost to complete funded the project completely. So that's an important subtlety to mention. So I appreciate you pointing that out. So there will likely be a gap there based on how that design plays out, where we're much farther along on design, obviously, with the 205. But Rose Quarter is a CMGC, not to get into the weeds, approach to project delivery. So that's one of the reasons why it's taking a little bit longer to get that further percent of design.
Great, thanks.
So I recognize that there is still a significant gap there.
That's a good
we've been
clarification. We understood it wasn't funded, and I think it's important to point that out. Who's next, John?
We have a question here from Sumi Malik that she typed in, but I'd like to ask if she would like to articulate it herself before I read it.
Sure, yeah, for whatever reason, I don't have the raise hand function. I'm not sure why. But, and this can be answered later in the agenda, but I was curious how tolling corridors are defined and what are the implications of those of that definition. So for example, you know, what underlies my question is if 82nd is part of the I-205 corridor, my understanding is that revenues could be spent on 82nd. I assume that traffic diversion will be analyzed, and so if there is a significant traffic diversion that could occur within these corridors, are those corridors going to help define where mitigations may happen? And again, it's fine to answer, you know, Lucinda may be able to answer better.
Yeah, I'll give you the high level answer, and Lucinda can give a little bit more detail when she comes on to me. Yeah, right now we've said we want the revenues, the net revenues that are generated on the corridor to stay on the corridor. That's a policy that the OTC has just adopted. The definition of the corridor is another piece that we need to work on, we didn't want to come with something prescribed at that point. We wanted to work with our regional partners to find out exactly what that is. We do know that they have to stay within the constitutional guidelines of Article 9, Section 3, but that, you know, that has the ability to make improvements on various rights of way. So we will be coming back with that definition of a corridor soon. Again, we're going to be Metro has a definition as well. We want to work and learn more about that and get feedback from our local partners. I think it'll be a part of that same conversation we'll be having on the entire finance plan of the finance plan for the plan will be the definition of the corridor. So thank you, Cindy. It's a good question, and Lucinda can talk a little bit more about that.
Great, thanks.
You bet.
John, who's next?
Mr. Chair, we have the next two hands are from Mayor Callaway and then Councilor Dirksen.
Thank you. Please, Steve, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you, John. I appreciate how well you're facilitating the meeting. So my question, well, I guess now one is a comment. Thanks to Sumi. Excellent question. And because I had a question about the corridors and the width, and I know with T2020, with Metro's Get Moving initiative, we looked at the corridors, is about a quarter mile on each side of the road. So for instance, Highway 26, as we looked at that as to whether or not that was a high employment corridor, we looked within a quarter of a mile on each side. So I'm guessing that Metro's definition then, if it is consistent from the T2020 task force to this process, is 1/4 mile on each side of 205 or I-5. My question, has to do with, the concerns about, freeways, basically, or the tolling, pushing folks out onto the local streets. And do we have a non-toll comparative base so that we can see how surface street traffic patterns change? We know that freeways are one of the safest ways to travel when we think of, devastating injuries, because typically they tend to be rear end injuries. They're not life-changing injuries, in cars. But once we get cars moving onto surface streets where we don't necessarily have bike and pedestrian, lanes, we are likely, I'm concerned that we may see an increase in that. So is there a comparative base case that we have going forward? So that would be the question following my initial comment, and thank you.
Yep. No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that is something that I don't want to take away from Lucinda's presentation. She'll be getting into and be able to answer that question a little bit better. But it's I think one of the things that we want to do while we're looking at this plan as it relates to the toll program is how can we minimize diversion. That's a big component of this for us on the toll parameters. So I'll let Lucinda get into that, as I'm sure she's listening, as she's coming up next after me to get into that technical question, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay with you. Thank you.
I think Craig was next. Craig, you're off. You're muted. Craig, we can't hear you. You're muted.
I guess I clicked the wrong button. Sorry. Brendan, thank you for the presentation and for this visual that you've given us. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the comments that have already been made. And when I look at this map and the corridors and the projects that are on it, and the ones that aren't on it, as pointed out by Commissioner Savitz, I guess I'm really grateful as I look around this virtual table at the faces there, that I see a lot of these same faces around the room, the virtual room, when we're in our JPAC meetings as well. Because that's where these corridors, these projects are coordinated with the rest of the regional transportation system through the RTP and through the work we do there. So I think my point is, I guess, that it's just very important that all of this be coordinated together, because we have to recognize that work on any of these corridors by whoever does it impacts all the others. And so I'm just grateful for the conversations that we can have here, and then those conversations we have elsewhere as well, and how we link those and coordinate those together.
Thanks, Craig. John, who's next?
We have a comment in the chat. They ask, how far along is the 217 project? And Brendan, before you answer, I provided the link to the project website and to their July 2020 newsletter. So if you have other information you want to provide, but a lot of the, I've provided a link there to the project specific details.
Well, let me help a little bit with that, since that's actually being delivered by the region, and so we're managing that project. It's on the urban mobility map because it's a very important project to urban mobility, but it's being delivered by the region, as are a number of the projects. And that's one of the things Brendan and I are still spending a lot of time working on is, you know, who's doing which one of these. Some of them are being delivered by the city of Portland for the Flanders bike ped crossing, for example. So there's a lot of coordination, collaboration, and to Councilor Dirksen's point, you know, how we all work these together as a system, and what the Metro's regional transportation plan and the rest of ours have, they all need to be worked together. The short answer is the 217 project is well into design. It will be going to bid into construction next year.
Good answer.
Thank you, Ryan.
Mr. Chair, next you have Commissioner Savas and then Hal Hagedorn.
Okay.
Brendan, real quick, don't want to take up a lot of time. Just want to make sure that the priority of the big three projects that this region worked on and advocated for and for years, the Rose Quarter project and the 205 project and the 217 project, that those are the top priority projects. Those aren't likely to change, right? I mean, they're still going to be the first to be delivered. Because it seems as though that one of the concerns may be that at least in my neck of the woods, that there's concern that they're hearing that there's no funding for 205, and you know, we're going into year 4 or 5 here pretty soon, and you know, they're not seeing any action on the ground yet. So just want to get that question out there now that I see all these other projects on here.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's why we're moving so quickly, and why the commission wanted it before their December 1st meeting. They feel like these as I mentioned, this is part of a system. We got to stop with this project by project approach. We need them all. So they tasked us with figuring that out without putting priority on one or the other, Commissioner.
Well, Hal, I think, is next.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't going to raise my hand again, but then I saw Commissioner Savas raise his hand, so I figured I'd raise it one more time. So hopefully this is a quick question, but so the other piece is the funding strategy, and you know, we've heard about the Metro 2020 bond. We all know that, and so tolling is a strategy. We all know that the gas tax is regressive. But I haven't heard much, and maybe because I'm not on JPAC and I'm not on other commissions or groups, but how does the road user charge fit into this picture? I mean, it's been a project that ODOT has undertaken for the last, I feel like, 20 years, and when are we going to see traction on that as a funding strategy as well?
Yeah, that's one that Councilor Dirksen has talked to us about quite a bit as well. Oregon's been been a pioneer in transportation funding. We were the first to have a gas tax. We were the first to have a VMT, the Origo program, and we're going to be hopefully, with everyone's help, knocking on wood, to have the first true congestion pricing program in the country as well, to help fund infrastructure and mobility needs in our region. So the Origo program and the VMT project is probably a few years out as far as implementation past the congestion pricing program. The two will be interoperable. That's something that I know I'm looking at you, Councilor Dirksen, because you've talked to us about that. Make sure that those systems are interoperable and can work together when that does come online. As we know, it's the wave of the future. So, but it's probably farther out in our kind of calculations. So a congestion pricing program is something how we can get up and running sooner than later to fund transportation and mobility needs around the region, where the Origo VMT system will likely come after that. So it's a sequencing issue, but it's one that we've, the two, Lucinda and her team, make sure they talk to the team at the Office of Innovation at ODOT, and they're making sure that those systems will work seamlessly. So, so drivers and people, users of the system will not notice a difference.
Mr. Chair, if I could give a very brief update on the road user fee to the group.
Sure, Craig, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to share with everyone that the Road User Fee Task Force has been meeting, and we are in the process of drafting a bill that will be hopefully going before the legislature for this season, for the 2021 session. If it were to move forward and pass, it would institute a mandatory road user fee charge beginning in late 2026.
Thank you, Craig. John, is there anybody else? The only reason I'm pushing it along is I'd like our friends in Hood River to have an opportunity to present the bridge.
Yes.
Tonight.
Jess Groves has his hand up, and then we have another question in the Q&A right now.
Okay, unless somebody is really objectionable, we'll take Jess and then we'll take the question, and maybe we'll move to Lucinda, and so we can, again, carve a little room. And Jess, this is your fault. Remember, you asked today to get this on tonight, so I'm teasing you a little bit, but so.
Thank you, Roy. I appreciate it. I just feel compelled to make some comments here. I'll make them brief as I can. But Brendan, I want to thank you. You've done a great job. And the last time you and I talked, you were working for the governor. So I see they're moving you around a little bit. I just want to say that Hood River understands the importance of all these projects, you know, for the Portland metro area and, you know, in transportation. But with that, we do have our concerns about a long-term, you know, vision out there of when money could be available for projects in Hood River County. We don't have MPOs or JPACs or anything like that in, you know, Hood River County. So, as you know, we sent a letter to in about our concerns, and it sounds like you're going to address those, Brendan, and I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Is that, Brendan, do you want to respond to him, or?
Yeah, no, sorry. I think I double muted myself. Thanks, Jess. Appreciate that. Good to see you again. Absolutely look forward to the conversation and seeing you again in my new role.
Thank you, Brendan.
Mr. Chair, we have a question here in the Q&A, and perhaps Ryan Wincheimer will take this, or perhaps Brendan. The question is, what is the proposed active traffic management project on I-205?
Yeah, and I did answer that in the chat. So I think if you go over to answered, it will show the answers. So we don't have to necessarily repeat all the ones that come in through that method if they feel like they got the answer. But the proposed active traffic management is similar to what you've seen on 217, I-205, and sections of I-5. It's the variable advisory speed signs, as well as the VMSs, the variable message boards that we use to show travel time and provide real-time traffic information. That's what those projects are.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, well, Brendan, thank you so much for being here tonight. We're going to move on to Lucinda. You're certainly invited to listen to her as well. One piece of administrative business before we jump to the next topic. We didn't catch the motion and the second in regard to the minutes. I think I might have heard Denny. Were you the second, Denny?
I tried, yes.
Who made the motion to accept the minutes? Nobody's, oh, okay, Pia did. Thank you, Pia.
Raising her hand. Yeah.
All right, so thank you. Vanessa's taking notes and I didn't catch it and she didn't hear it either. So Pia was the motion maker and Denny was the second. Thank you. All right, we'll move then to Lucinda, who we've become quite familiar with as she's presented to all of us multiple times, and glad to see you back tonight. And so take it away.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Again, Lucinda Broussard, Tow Program Director for ODOT. And I do have a presentation. And John, if
Yeah.
you can.
We should be getting the getting you set up here just as.
There you go. Next slide, please. I'm going to provide an update on where we are with the I-205 NEPA. As you know, we've been in the comment period and that is extended until the 16th of October. So it went from a 45-day comment period to a 75-day comment period, but we wanted to make sure that we are cognizant of what's going on in the world with the fires and did not want to make our comment period the most important thing going on. So we did move that out. Here's a timeline of where we are and what it looks like for I-205 as we go into the National Environmental Policy Act. Here's our I want to start at that orange lollipop, and that's what we'll call it tonight, is where we got started we got started and then we asked for comments, and that comment period is pretty much gone. It's still going. So we are still open on our website. You can still go out and take the survey, still call in and send emails. We are still accepting comments. And as you can see in the winter, we'll have all of those kind of categorized, and then we will also have what the analysis is showing after we review them all. So at this point, we're still gathering. After that, we'll go into in the summer, we'll have some mitigation impacts. And as you know, we do have a transit multimodal group. We also have a regional modeling group. We also have the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. So a lot of people looking at what kind of mitigations we could have for whatever we find. Going all the way to 2022, you can see we're almost done by then, and we're looking forward to the end, but at this point, we're at the very beginning. Next slide, please. Here's the comment period and what we've been doing. So we've done briefings. We did 3 webinars. We have kind of gone out and tried to saturate the market with asking for your comments regarding the I-205. We asked for comments on the purpose and need statement, goals and objectives, and the alternatives. And we had 5 alternatives out there that we were asking for comments about. So this is just kind of our lay of the land. This is where we wound up. When we went out, we did flyers, fact sheets. This is all the work we did at that ground level. So this was our foundational work. Next slide, please. Here's all the briefings we did. We just thought that, actually seeing them all, and you're right, you probably heard me a few places. As you can see, I've been many places. So I just wanted to say, we were out talking about it. We wanted to make sure that if you didn't read about it, if you didn't get on the website, that we actually were in the communities also in a virtual manner in a very virtual manner, but we were out talking about what was going on. Next slide, please. Equitable engagement. As you can see, we did fact sheets in many different languages. So not only were we, and that was one of our things that I think we came into maybe 3-4 weeks into it, we realized that, we really weren't reaching communities or as we call them, our groups who are underserved and underrepresented. We did have the fact sheets out. I think towards the end, we did Spanish radio, which really did help us. But we were out trying to get people who normally don't talk to us to talk to us. And we're kind of trying to do that all virtually and by paper. It's totally different than being out at a community fair where you can actually see people and talk to people. So we really did try to do something virtual that could bring in people that we were trying to make sure we heard their voice. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So then we did a heat map. Who are we hearing from? I would say we're at, well, that was at 3855. That was last, I think we talked on Thursday. So we're probably at 4,000 now comments that we've received. You can see the breakdown there. We were really trying to improve the low income, BIPOC, communities that we normally don't reach. We were really out there trying to do that. You can see we were somewhat successful. But here's where, and you can see the project area, right where the project area is where we received the most comments. But we did spread out a bit. So we kind of did make it around, which was what we were trying to do. You can see we made it around a while. I was like, I look at this heat map and I go, wow, this is not so bad. That means that we did reach people that we were trying to reach. So that's kind of our heat map. Next one. As you know, we have the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. We are looking forward to their next meeting, which is the 14th of October, and then they'll meet again in December to kind of talk about an engagement plan. So as I said, we were really trying to get out there. They're going to help us do that by helping with an engagement plan. And actually on equity, how do we reach communities that we normally don't reach? We're going to take their engagement plan, lay it on top of ours, and then the next time we're out, we'll make sure that we test and try all the things that they have in theirs. Next meeting in January, basically we've been just actually setting up the group. So they'll do the charter this time. They'll actually do the, I think I heard from How, she couldn't get on the equity framework. They'll be adopting that this time also. We'll make sure that that happens. And then performance measures. We're going to talk about what performance measures are and then how they develop them. So they're instrumental in what we're about to do. They've come on a little bit after we got started with the 205, but they'll be there for the 5 at the beginning. Next slide, please. And next steps, I'll be here again in December, and by then we should have all the comments organized. We'll at least have them all coded. We won't have them all analyzed to what edits or changes we may be making to the purpose and need, the alternatives, and the goals and objectives. And then I'll be back in early next 2021 to talk about what those changes were after we have analyzed all of those comments. Next slide, please. I-5, it's kind of just, it's still on the back burner. We have the planning and environmental linkages. We're still building that, talking about how we do that. It's a long stretch to figure out the termini. I think Brendan just brought you the congestion management map that plays a part into what we do next also. So I think my next slide is, I think Brendan mentioned this, or I think Hal might have asked a question about this. So this was the policy that the OTC set. After going out and talking to a lot of you, I heard about revenue should stay on the corridor or should stay on the project. I think it started as project, it ended as corridor, but that the revenues that are collected there get invested there. OTC did approve that, so we do now have that. As Brendan said, we'll be out talking about not only the congestion management map, but also what the corridors, defining those corridors also and making sure they line up with what our partners want. So I know you asked that I bring this, and this is how I presented it. 205 starting at the 5, ending at Glen Jackson, and then I-5 starting at IBR, ending at the Boone Bridge. Next slide, please. That was it. I thought I was going to be pretty quick tonight. So, Chair, thank you so much for giving me some time this evening. And if there are any questions.
Thank you, Lucinda. Always nice to see you. John, you're moderating the hands.
The first 3 hands up are Paul Savis, Bill Avison, and Craig Dirksen.
Good evening, Lucinda. Good to see you again. On that topic of the OTC's decision to keep the dollars in the corridor, and knowing that some of these projects, you know, by length, you know, the project for the 205 is a 5.8 mile project, but yet where there's over 20 miles of the length of the corridor. So is that to suggest that the corridor can go well beyond the actual project, even though it's in the same corridor? It seems as though that's not the intent of the question or the desire to keep those dollars localized in the essence of impacts and the diversion. So is there better explanations of that, or is there more refinement coming?
There's more refinement, but I want to just talk a little bit about the diversion. When we find that there's diversion, it'll be part of the project. It won't be something that later we're going to come back to. So we'll be doing that finer look through those alternatives that are chosen. We'll go down to the street level for diversion. And those are some things we'll take care of as part of the project in the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
John, who was next?
Bill Avison was next.
Thanks, Lucinda. I think it was a good presentation. Is there any way we could go back to that timeline?
Sure. The first one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we go back to John? John, is it you or is it Heather?
It's
We'll
okay.
get it pulled up here in just a second.
If you can't, it's okay. I think the end of the timeline showed 2022 that you said you'd be done final. And
Done final with the NEPA process, or the National Environmental Policy Act. We'll have the FONSI by then.
Okay, so as far as the actual lights coming on, the tolling, what timing is that? And then my next question is, and I know they're separate projects and it's not your position tonight to point out timelines for the build out, but how soon would the build out start after the tolling? Does anyone know that here?
I do not. I can tell you that tolling is on like a 2 year after, 2 to 2.5 years after we're done with the NEPA process.
Okay, so is it fair to say that we probably wouldn't start building for at least 2025 or further out?
I don't know, and we should have brought Mandy with us. Actually, she's the I-205 program director or project director, and she could have answered that question. So we will take it back and make sure that we give it to John to post.
Great. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Was it Craig next? I think that's right. Yeah.
Yes. Councilor Dirksen.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to sing the song that I've sung before, but I'll reprise it a little bit for brevity tonight. There's some points that need to be made. Demand management still needs to be explicit and integrated into the purpose and need, not just as a goal of this project, but as a part of the purpose and need. I'd also like to address the comments that were made earlier about how do you identify what a corridor is when you say the funding is going to stay in the corridor. And we believe that the term corridor needs to be defined comprehensively so it allows a range of multimodal solutions that are specific to each corridor. So the solutions should take into account both diversion and multimodal travel. And then last, but maybe most important, this program with I-205 and I-5 is identified as a pilot program to determine what the effects of tolling are. And if you're going to get any real data on those effects, you must implement tolling on I-5 and 205 at the same time. If you do them separately, you will get unrealistic and unrepresentative diversions to each other and to other adjacent corridors. And the information you get from your pilot won't be valuable moving forward to a more comprehensive congestion pricing system. So we're adamant, and we sent a letter that you should have received in your materials for this meeting from the Metro Council, adamant about the need for these two corridors to both be tolled simultaneously.
Thank you, Craig. Those are points you've made in the past. I think they're good. John, is there anybody else in the?
Yes, we have a question in the chat from Director Warner, and I'll pause just in case he'd like to say them to unmute himself, or I can read it out loud.
Sure. Why does that cat keep showing up? What is that?
I'll pause. If you have a button in your control panel called chat, looks like a little text message bubble. If you click on that, you should get another window that pops open, and you can see there's a few comments there.
No, I'm saying on the screen, we keep seeing a cat climbing a tree, and I don't know why.
Oh,
that
a
keeps-
cat.
Cat,
Sorry.
C-A-T.
It's my high school French coming back, thinking that chat and cat are the same thing.
Okay.
Sorry, Director Warner.
Yeah, if you could go to the second to the last slide, I believe. So in going through the NEPA statements, let's see. One more, please. Back one more.
It's one more back. One more.
Yeah. Regardless, so in terms of
I know which one you want. Yes,
Yeah.
the one where it's one more. It's another one back. It's what I'm going to do when I come back in December. And
sure, yeah. So in just
yes.
in terms of the NEPA statements, so I know you'll do it and you'll categorize them. When will you come back to us? Will you come back to us with kind of what your final recommendation is to forward before you send it, or what's the kind of the order on how that works?
Correct. So I'll come back in December and let you know how they were all coded, kind of the summary wise of 4,000 comments. Here are the buckets they fall in. I'll come back early next year and give you the recommendations from what we have after we've read them and analyzed them. They will not be going to FHWA until after I come back here.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
That's what you're after. Yeah, not a problem.
Mr. Chair, we have another comment here in the chat from Hal Hagedorn. She says she's saying she's had the same question as Craig. How are you defining corridor for spending toll revenue? So I think that's just a second. I don't know if you want to answer, if you want to talk more about it.
I think Brendan did a little bit about it, and I'll stay with that one. Basically, when we're out talking about that congestion map, we'll also be talking about defining corridors.
Mr. Chair, we have 3 hands up. We have Ryan Winchheimer, Mike Oates, and Steve Calloway.
Ryan, if you don't mind, if I'll take Mike and then Steve and then you, is that fine? Okay, please, Mike.
Thank you. Lucinda, one question. In our last meeting, we were talking about the polling booths and how many and where they were going to go, and we're kind of going through a process of what we thought would be best. Where are we with that process?
So no toll booths. We are just looking for where to terminate. So we would just where to place the gantries that will have all the equipment on them. That is part of the National Environmental Policy Act. So as we get through these alternatives, goals and objectives, purpose and need, that's coming later. So that's part of that.
So how many places those would take place? We haven't decided that yet. That's
no, we have not. That's
okay,
still open. You're welcome.
I think it's important.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. Steve, I think you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And hi, Lucinda.
Hey.
Good to see you again.
You too.
And, thank you for your presentation. So I asked Ryan, about, non-toll comparative base cases, and he kind of punted that to you. So I was wondering if there's going to be, a base case, with that, so that we can begin to make some comparisons, between, toll and non-toll impact on surface streets and in that sort of thing. And if so, then what year will we be using, for that base case?
So right now, yes, we will, because as part of the National Environmental Policy Act, you have to have a no-build scenario. When you're asking when we will have that case, don't know yet. I think what you're asking me is part of what's come through in some of the comments, and we haven't really looked at all those comments yet and done that assessment, so I can't say.
And I appreciate that answer. And my intent is not to put you on a spot by, asking, dates. So if it's something that, that can be shared, subsequently, that would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Not a problem. We will share everything that we do.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we're back to Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to add in, actually, all 3 of the topics that we've been talking about tonight are things that the commission is talking about directly with the urban mobility team as well. I know Lucinda is looking forward to taking some more policy conversation to them. And so those are all online and available if you'd like to watch those and see that interaction as well. I think the next one's October 22nd. So I just wanted to flag that as if this is something that you really want to get into a little higher level of detail and hear where the commission is, those are a good opportunity to watch. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there anyone, we lost our time again, but I'm trying to keep it to 10 minutes for the folks in Hood River. Is there any more questions for Lucinda tonight? She's going to be back next month, right?
I'll be back at your next meeting, correct, in December.
That's my understanding. Okay.
There are no more hands raised
Okay.
or questions in the Q&A. Councilor Dirksen has added a comment in the chat, but I think that we've addressed the table.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And Lucinda, thank you for being here tonight. And we'll jump into Travis's presentation then on something that we all are very interested in. And not that we aren't on all of these, but this one particularly in the funding 24-27. So Travis, I know you're there somewhere.
I am indeed here. So
oh, there you are. Yeah.
Thank you for having me back. I was here a couple months ago to talk about the STIP, and we are at the next stage of that STIP development, where we are beginning to put together some scenarios for the Oregon Transportation Commission to review and analyze. I have to apologize a little bit that we are early in the process of actually analyzing these scenarios. So when we go to the commission in a couple of weeks, we're actually going to have a full analysis of the outcomes of the scenarios I'm going to show you tonight. Unfortunately, that's not coming until next week. So I'm going to give you a sense of what scenarios we're looking at, but it's going to be a little bit thin in terms of what actually each of these different scenarios would accomplish. I'm going to share my screen and show you this slideshow. Everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, then I haven't found a way to screw it up yet, but I'm sure by the end of the night I can probably find a way. So we are in the process of developing the funding allocations for the 24-27 STIP. The commission started this in July, and we are planning to wrap up the first stage of that work in December. So we're really at the point where the rubber's meeting the road. We have been engaging our stakeholders, including advisory committees, pretty extensively throughout this. I've already done we as an agency have done one round with all of our advisory committees. We're starting on that second round. We wanted to have discussions on the various funding scenarios that we're offering up. We're also going to be doing online open house to allow public comment on the funding scenarios, and also scheduling a webinar for a public comment opportunity. And then, of course, encouraging our advisory committees, stakeholders, the public to weigh in through letters to the OTC. So they have that on the record as well. So many opportunities for all of you to weigh in, either individually or collectively as an area commission on transportation, on how you would like to see the OTC shape the funding allocation for the 24-27 STIP. Last time I was here, I shared with you about the strategic action plan that the commission is developing, where they've laid out in concert with ODOT 3 priorities: equity, creating a modern transportation system, and sufficient and reliable funding. I bring these back to you just as a reminder that this is what the commission is going to be working to achieve through the STIP funding allocation. They've laid out a number of goals in the modern transportation system around preservation and stewardship of the system, safety, accessibility, mobility and climate change, congestion relief, project delivery, and innovative technologies. And those are the goals essentially against which we're going to be judging and weighing the trade-offs as we look at the various funding scenarios. So as I noted, we don't have that information yet, but still wanted to make sure we were able to get out to the ACTs as they have their meetings and be able to talk to you and get your feedback on the various scenarios that are going in front of the commission. So as a reminder, we have 6 categories in the STIP. One is enhanced highway for projects that expand or enhance the transportation system, primarily state highways. Fix-it projects that maintain or fix the state highway system, like bridges, pavement, culverts, those sort of projects. Safety projects are those that are focused on reducing fatal and serious injury crashes on Oregon's roads for all users, drivers, pedestrians, cyclists as well. Non-highway programs are those that are dedicated specifically to bicycle, pedestrian, public transportation, transportation options. Local programs provide funding to local agencies, and then other functions is sort of a catch-all, but it's primarily our planning and data collection, which is required by the federal government. So we have started with these scenarios and presented to the Oregon Transportation Commission last month to get their feedback on direction. What we've done with these scenarios is each of them provides the same level of funding for the local programs for ADA curb ramps to meet our commitments to retrofit all of our curb ramps to be compliant, and for the other functions. And I should note that these scenarios are based on the direction that we received from the commission back in August when we had a conversation with them about priorities. And they're also reflective of the public comment that we received over time from advisory committees, the general public, and stakeholders as we've gone out and done these conversations with stakeholders. So all of these scenarios provide a base level of funding for those three categories, and then vary in how much they provide to the other categories within the STIP. So the adjusted baseline is really based on if you were to carry forward the policy decisions that the commission made in the 21-24 STIP, how much money would you spread across those various programs? And then each of the other scenarios modifies that a little bit, putting more money to some categories and less to others. Generally what you see here is as we share more money with other programs or other categories, the fix-it category, which is the biggest category of funding for bridges and pavement and culverts, things like that, goes down a little bit in order to accommodate more funding for other areas. The idea of these scenarios is really to let the commission start weighing the trade-offs in terms of what outcomes will you get if you modify these scenarios, modify the funding allocation, what happens across the various outcomes and goals that we're trying to achieve. And then be able to have a conversation about those trade-offs and how we should weigh them and how we should prioritize them. So let me walk you through each of the scenarios just really briefly. And then what I'd really like to do though is just get some comments from you on where you might like to see this end up. Again, without having enough context to really tell you what each of these scenarios does, but allow you to give that feedback at this early stage. So the enhanced scenario is really focused on a number of different programs. It increases the highway enhanced programs that are focused on congestion relief and freight movement, as well as the non-highway programs for bicycle, pedestrian, and transit. It does that by reducing fix-it funding for bridges, pavement, and culverts. So this is really focused a little bit on enhancing the amount of funding that goes to, or increasing the amount of funding that goes to enhanced programs to help with accessibility and mobility for both users of our roads, as well as for other modes of the transportation system. One of the things I should note is that the 21-24 STIP had a lot more money built into it for the enhanced programs because the legislature dedicated so much money in that HB 2017 legislation through the dedicated projects there, that yellow slice for enhanced highway projects would have been much bigger in the 21-24 STIP. That fell off considerably as the 24-27 STIP. Those projects will largely be done. There's just a small amount of those that will be moving forward. The second scenario from that we're proposing to the commission is the non-highway scenario. What this does is it about doubles the amount of non-highway funding that would be included in the STIP for bicycle, pedestrian, and public transportation programs, as well as transportation options. One of the things I should note is that as we look at the non-highway category overall, only a very small sliver of the non-highway funding that flows through ODOT actually is included in the STIP. Most of the programs that are funded in the non-highway area are actually outside the STIP. So this non-highway category really only includes the FHWA funds that go to transit and for bicycle and pedestrian projects, as well as the state highway fund programs like the 1% for bike ped or safe routes to school. Only about 20% of ODOT's or the total dedicated federal and state non-highway funding actually goes through the STIP. So there's a huge amount of money, not necessarily adequate, in fact, definitely not adequate, that flows through other sources for the non-highway category. So this would provide more transportation options by providing more money for bike ped and public transportation programs. And it would do that by reducing the amount of funding in the fix-it category for bridges, pavement, and culverts. The safety and non-highway category is one that is really focused on plussing up the safety funds. It's actually fairly similar to the enhanced category. That's because when we talked to the commission, they actually asked us to modify that enhanced category. So this one is focused primarily on plussing up safety with some additional money for non-highway programs, as many of those are focused on safety as well. So we would expect that when we do the analysis on this, we would see higher levels of mobility and accessibility for users of the system, as well as greater safety with reduced crashes and serious injuries resulting in this scenario. Then the last scenario is one that is really focused on preservation of the system. It increases funding through the fix-it category for bridges, pavement, and culverts. It does that by basically reducing down to a very low level the highway enhanced, non-highway, and safety categories. So this is one that, you know, perfectly honest, probably is not going to be the selected scenario because it does reduce significantly those other categories. And yet, given the needs on the system, we know that even this amount of fix-it funding isn't enough to ensure that we can preserve the system. I think when I was last here a couple months ago, we talked about how our bridges at this point are in a 900-year replacement cycles. We're only replacing about 3 bridges per year. So we know that in order to keep our system open and operating effectively, to preserve mobility in the long run, we're going to need to spend more money on fix-it projects as well. So those are the 5 different scenarios that the commission will have in front of it this month when we have a discussion with them. Admittedly, they'll have a lot more information on what the outcomes of these various scenarios look like. We are beginning the process of analyzing all these, and then we'll be reporting back to the commission using what we're jokingly calling sort of the consumer reports outline for showing what the various outcomes are. We're looking at things like congestion relief and multimodal accessibility, equity, safety, climate mitigation, adaptation, and the state of good repair of the system. So each of these scenarios will be judged by how much progress they make toward those goals compared to the other baseline scenarios. When we have that, we'll have essentially a summary of all of these scenarios. This is not, for the record, an actual analysis. This is just someone randomly plugging in graphics on this page. We'll be able to compare the various scenarios in terms of how they do across each of these areas, and then be able to weigh the trade-offs for the commission as they begin their deliberations. So the next steps for the OTC, in October, we're going to share these scenarios with them. This is going to be at their meeting on the 22nd, which will be happening online, as all meetings seem to be these days. We're going to share those scenarios, the results of the analysis. We'll have the commission provide feedback on refining scenarios. About that time, we're also going to be going out to the public to get your input in a more systematic manner so that we can share that with the commission as well in December. Their meeting is on the 1st, and we'll expect that they will likely select the funding allocation option that day. Pick one of these scenarios, essentially. And then we also would expect that at that point, we'll be having a discussion with them on how to use any additional federal funds that have come in. This is an issue that often gets brought up as we take public comment. Every STIP cycle, we have to make an assumption about federal funding, which is very difficult when there's no surface transportation authorization in place beyond this STIP. In fact, the surface transportation authorization was just extended for 1 year, but it expires before the 21-24 STIP ends, in fact, 3 years before it ends. So we've had to make some assumptions about federal funding. We do that in a fairly conservative manner, and then if funding comes in over and above that, we're able to allocate those funds. We're going to be asking the commission for direction on how they would like us to consider allocating those additional federal funds should the federal government come in with more money than we have allocated in the STIP process. So with that, I will wrap up and I will put up this graphic just to remind you of the various scenarios, and happy to take questions or any comments you might have about these scenarios and the process we're going through.
Thank you, Travis. A couple of things from me real quickly before I jump into it. Has there been any sort of criteria established for project selection? And that's important so that we understand that criteria. Yeah. And then a big topic from the state has been jurisdictional transfer. That's happening everywhere. Is that going to factor in on how you prioritize? So is there, if somebody takes a road that's a state highway, will they get bonus points or will they accelerate the project? So if you could answer those two real quickly and we'll jump into.
Yeah, Commissioner Rogers, those are good questions. And the funding scenarios is really the first step in this. And then once the commission provides us the feedback on scenarios, that's when we dig a little bit deeper down into how that money may be used. So we have some assumptions about how, for example, the non-highway funding could be used. But the reality is we have not put together a full proposal for the commission. We'll do that as we start getting a better sense of where the commission is going. And I would say the same thing is true for jurisdictional transfers. We have not yet made a determination on how we might tackle jurisdictional transfers or whether that would be a high priority within this. And of course, that's really up for the commission to determine at some point in this process. But that could be something that could be put on the table as one of the areas to fund within whatever scenario the commission chooses as they work through this process.
Thank you, Travis. John, is there, I know there's probably questions.
Oh, we've got hands up. We sure do.
All right.
Okay. First, Chris Warner has typed a message, so I'd like to ask if he'd like to articulate or just leave it in the chat.
Thanks, John. So I guess we just wanted to give our general support for, and I can read what I wrote, developing a program or allocation process that provides funding for the improvement of state-owned urban arterials like 82nd Avenue or other facilities like that throughout the region. So I think that's one thing we'd like to prioritize, and talk about jurisdictional transfers at the same time. I'm just trying to figure out where in those scenarios additional funding for that would fall.
Yeah, Chris, that could be something that could be funded either through an enhanced highway program or through some of the funding in the fix-it category or even in non-highway. At this point, we haven't set aside a specific category where that could be funded. So that'd be something we'd have to think through in this process. Because any of those funding sources could be good sources of funding for some of those jurisdictional transfer and investments in state-owned urban arterials. Obviously, we will make investments in some or many of those urban arterials, even if there isn't a focused program. But a focused program, as you note, could allow you to make improvements and then have those conversations about the jurisdictional transfers. And obviously, if the Metro T2020 ballot measure passes, that would put that conversation on speed, really.
Thank you, Travis. Who is next, John?
Okay, here are your next three names. You have Sumi Malik, Steve Calloway, and Jason Snyder.
Okay, Sumi, you're up.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Travis, for the presentation. I have a process question regarding in the event that there's extra federal funding that comes in. You mentioned that you tend to budget conservatively, and when there is unanticipated federal funding that comes in, that the OTC decides how to allocate it, and that means that it's not subject to this rigorous evaluation, and so I was curious, why be conservative? Why not budget to something that perhaps is a bit more realistic?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. It's one we've wrestled with over the years, and always have that tension between realism, conservatism, and actually I would say in a lot of ways our realism is fairly conservative, or our conservatism is fairly realistic. I don't know which way to put that. In that when the Surface Transportation Authorization Act expired in 2009 and then was extended, we actually saw federal funding fall by about 8% over a number of years. And in fact, we hit the high water mark in 2010, I believe, and then did not equal or exceed that amount until 2019. So the reality is, had we assumed funding would continue at that level, we would have had something like $100 million shortfall right out of the gate. I'm gonna go shut the door because my dog is going nuts.
Yeah, hard to hear.
Sorry about that. So the reality is that federal funding in recent years has really been flat or declining. So if we were to assume either growth or even flat funding, there's a decent chance then that we would come up short and have to go cut projects from the STIP. Mr. Warner was with the governor's office back in 2007 when we had a fun exercise where the commission had to go through cutting. And that was one that was not enjoyable for anyone. So the commission has always, since then, decided that they would rather budget fairly conservatively or realistically and then give direction to the department about where any additional funds should be spent. So they did that for us for this current 21-24 STIP back in December 2017, and we would ask them to do the same. And they would then have that opportunity to be able to have that discussion as part of this scenario analysis.
Travis,
Thanks for that background.
Thank you. Was it Steve next? I believe so, yeah.
Chair, I'm happy to defer to Mayor Snyder if you'd prefer, because he hasn't had a chance to speak yet tonight.
So your question will be answered by him? Or by,
No,
he'll ask
I always do what he says.
Oh, good. And if Jason's up, for sure.
We almost, the other dog woke my dog up. I thought I was going to start having the same issue. That was quite impressive, Travis. I want to just emphasize the question about the urban arterials and jurisdictional transfer, and just emphasize the importance of that, Travis, and something's got to be figured out. I am honestly embarrassed to answer questions about the urban arterial in my jurisdiction, and it is by far the thing I hear the most about when I hear about a road in poor condition, and it's really just embarrassing. And I think that they deserve to be maintained, or at least maintained somewhat. I don't know that there's much of any maintaining that's really happening, and I really think that it needs the state needs a strategy about that that's workable. I want to emphasize that point. I would talk about it all night if I were allowed to.
Jason.
Yeah, thanks for that. That is something clearly that is in need, particularly in the Portland metro region. We don't hear about it as much from other regions of the state, but in the metro region, we clearly have so many highways that no longer serve that statewide or regional interconnection function that, as you note, frankly, we have been to a significant extent at ODOT generally ignoring. So,
well, and Travis, when I travel around, I got to be honest, when I travel around the rest of the state, I don't see highways that look like that in a lot of the other state. I mean, there are some that aren't in great repair, but they don't look anything like the things in the Portland metro area.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the most of those highways that you're talking about, we classify it down as district level highways. And so they're comparable to some of the other district level highways across the state that generally are fairly low traveled. So you have high volume district highways, whereas most of our district highways in the rest of the state are extremely low travel volumes. And so they're really not very comparable. So totally get your point that those deserve some way of achieving the levels of service that really should be provided.
Jason. Who's next, John?
Well, the list shows Steve Calloway.
He gave up his turn. He said he didn't want to ask anything.
No, I just was going to defer to Jason first. So let me jump in. Thank you, Roy, for giving me a chance. A couple of things. First of all, how is it determined what regions get which money? Because Region 1 has a higher population, I think, more lane miles, yet it doesn't appear that Region 1 funding is appreciably higher than Region 2. And I think there was an allocation slide that came out, but I don't see it tonight.
Yeah, it's a good question, Mayor Calloway. The reality is that it differs by each of the programs. So some programs are competitive statewide, like a lot of our non-highway programs, they select the projects, the best projects across the state. In other areas, it is determined based on, say, bridge condition or pavement conditions. So it sort of depends. We do have what we call the modernization equity formula that spreads money around the state based on a number of factors. So when we use that formula, then Portland gets, the Portland Metro region, Region 1, I should say, gets something like 40% of the funding, which is fairly commensurate with population. And actually, it's interesting, we just did an analysis of the 21-24 STIP. And when you look across all of the programs in that STIP, the Metro region received a share of the funding that was about equal to its population of the state. And that is actually not necessarily what we've seen in other STIPs. Part of that was because the earmark allocations that the legislature made in HB 2017 were heavily weighted toward the Portland Metro region. So as a result, it looked a little bit different than we'd seen in the past. But the short answer is every program is just a little bit different in terms of how the funding is allocated. And so some STIPs, it differs a little bit depending on where the money goes.
And then my separate question, as has been noted tonight a few times, December 1st is the next meeting for the OTC. We don't meet until December 7th. And so are we supposed to give our preferences tonight for the STIP for the OTC to consider in December, almost 2 months from now, or are they going to, I guess, put off that decision until after we meet in December so that we can give our preferences?
Yeah, so that is one of the challenges we're facing with this calendar is that the commission is meeting and not all the acts have a meeting in between those two October and December 1st meetings. So to the extent you can provide feedback now is great. If not, that's why we're having a webinar and a online open house so that individual members of the acts, individual jurisdictions, members of the public can go and provide feedback through those mechanisms. Hopefully you're educated up. You certainly as an act are welcome to weigh in collectively, but we're providing those opportunities as well because we recognize the timing on some of the meetings didn't line up perfectly with the OTC's October 22nd and December 1st meeting.
So then Chairman Rogers is, would, I guess would the Region 1 Act, be open to, I guess, receiving a letter, if there were things that we wanted to give that we also wanted, I guess, buy-in and agreement then is an act?
Steve,
would it be all individually?
Yeah, we've written letters before. One of the problems is, as Travis has made it very clear tonight, to some of us who are curious about the jurisdictional transfer that hasn't been established, they don't know. As far as criteria, how we would select projects, that's not been established, would be very preliminary. Maybe the letter would be that we ask them to refrain from making a decision until January. I don't know. I'd have to listen to everybody else's comments, but it's difficult at best.
I think either they hold off until January, we try to squeeze a meeting in prior to December 1.
Okay. Paul, I think you're next.
You're always welcome to weigh in on things like project selection criteria that we have not yet waded deeply into or jurisdictional transfers. And the earlier the comments come in, the better. But certainly we welcome whatever you want to say.
Great.
If
I saw your hand raised, Paul.
January, that would also allow for T2020 to be settled because that's a big wild card, big variable right now.
We agree. Yeah, yep. Steve, you're right. Paul, were you next, I think?
Yeah. Good to see you again, Travis. I do want to build a little bit on what Mayor Calloway is referencing as far as the timelines and also earlier with Brendan Finn's presentation and his work coming together around the same time, and there's just a lot going on. And in the interest of public involvement and input, I'm concerned that there's not really going to be adequate time for us to have an informed letter in that period of time. So I would respectfully suggest or ask that either we move our meeting up a week, or I know that's right around the holiday, unfortunately, with Thanksgiving, but we either add a meeting or ask respectfully the OTC to maybe make this call in January and give us some breathing room to absorb all. There's just too many things coming together. And so that's one thing I want to just say. My question is, knowing that ODOT has, rightfully expressed its concern about the impacts of COVID and the budget, and I'm looking at the graph and I'm estimating it looks like about 2.5 billion. Yeah, 2.5 billion. Is that around the same mark, or is that factoring in, that those budgetary shortfalls?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we've done our revenue estimates to date for the State Highway Fund, what it has found is that for this period, for 24 through 27, we expect that the COVID-19 pandemic and recession will hopefully, knock on wood, be a distant memory by that point, and our revenue will have returned essentially to historic levels. So this factors that in. However, I will note that for the 21-24 STIP, the commission just approved that STIP. And unfortunately, our revenue will be impacted during that 21-24 period. So we are currently doing a new State Highway Fund revenue forecast that it was due in, I think, about 2 weeks. That will give us the most up-to-date information. You may have seen that the state just did a revenue forecast. So we're going to use that and factor that in. And that will tell us what changes we need to make to the 21 through 24 STIP with any adjustments there.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. On the price tag, has there been any kind of estimate for the price tag maybe for my respected colleagues around the table here today on some of these jurisdictional transfers? I'm just kind of wondering about how that impacts some of these other buckets, if you will, and if that results in, basically whose ox gets gored or what category, sees the shortfalls. Is there any sense of what that cost is?
The jurisdictional transfers, I mean, it varies by jurisdiction and by facility and what people need. We just did 2 very low cost jurisdictional transfers with Sandy and with Hood River, where we're just doing a little bit of paving and doing the ADA ramps. Other jurisdictions are asking for a lot more, and that's a lot more expensive. So Metro's got a process where they're identifying some cost to upgrade. We've done a study with City of Portland on what do we call it? State of good repair estimate for Interpal. All those things can help inform those, but it really depends on what the jurisdictions are looking for and how we can get deals to come together. Sometimes they're expensive and sometimes they're not.
Thank you.
John, let's do a little management here. How many more people are wanting to speak?
Yes, sir. There are 5 hands up. Craig Dirksen, John Davies, Brian Hodson, Bill Avison, and Pam Treese.
And we have, I do not want to put Kevin Greenwood off again from Hood River. He's done it twice, and that's not good. Maybe we ought to chat a minute about having some sort of another meeting, and we may not resolve that tonight. But we certainly, Paul, if you're available, I am. I know we do a lot of back and forth with Ryan in regard to these meetings, and maybe we can establish something before the next OTC meeting, and that would facilitate. I'm not trying to cut everybody off, but if we could do that, then we could maybe take the rest of these questions and get that resolved. Paul, what do you think?
Well, Roy, thanks for the question. The more I thought about it, maybe my suggestion of having a meeting early on, the flaw with that is that we wouldn't have Mr. Finn's report back on that CCMP map and project he's working on. I think that's a concern also for a decision if that's what's going to be taking place at the OTC. So maybe in light of the holiday and that fact, if Travis or anyone can maybe just see if there's a possibility the OTC could respectfully, give us a month more, bring us up in January. Is that possible?
So Commissioner Savis, and I just put in the OTC is meeting fewer times than they have been in the past. And if they're going to keep on schedule, they're going to probably need to make that decision earlier rather than later. So if we want to get together and have another meeting, I'm happy to schedule that. It can be less than the normal time allotted. So maybe we only want to meet for an hour and review it and try to come together on some recommendations. That might be easier to schedule than a full meeting like we have. But I'm happy to help get that scheduled.
Yeah, I concur. I don't think the OTC will change their schedule. And Travis, I mean, we can ask, but I suspect that you're not able to move that mountain either. So if we could do something around the holiday there of Thanksgiving, and I'm not saying that, obviously we'll be respectful, maybe send out, Ryan, a request to people what would be a good night to meet. Instead of our meeting, we have the same problem with the congestion. That's one of the first things I asked Brendan, how are we supposed to communicate if you're having this meeting? And he said he's going to call us all. Well, I doubt, Travis, that you want to call all of us here, plus other affected jurisdictions. So would that satisfy the group that we go ahead and we look for something that meets your schedule? We schedule another meeting in November. That'll be in lieu, so you won't have a December one. With that, I see a bunch of good. Anybody who doesn't like that idea? Brian, you're
just John. He's got to find a time for us to all get together. But
okay,
I do think that makes sense. It seems like it's timely and it's core function of what we do. I think that it would be useful to do that following Travis's webinar and the opportunity to do some of these other educational opportunities when we have clearer information and have heard OTC direction on what they're looking for comment on. We'll schedule something between then and their meeting in December.
If it's possible, maybe, Chair, we could send a letter asking that they delay, knowing that our backup plan then would be to have a meeting. And, because if they can delay, then that doesn't put all of the, I guess, the burden on us, and it allows us to continue with our schedule, but at least we would have a fallback plan of a meeting if they couldn't.
I'm happy to do that, Steve, but I think we ought to schedule a meeting and then we can always cancel it if we need to. So send the letter, and I suspect they're going to say no, and then we just have the meeting. So if we can schedule that, that's our fallback.
Perfect.
Is there anybody opposed to this? And I apologize to Pam and Brian, and I think Craig, and there was a couple of others who wanted to say something, but if we could give poor Kevin Greenwood, I mean, he's been asking to be on, so I would like to respect that if we can. Okay, I'm not hearing any opposition. Ryan, then our marching orders, and Paul, we'll need to have a conversation with, you're the vice chair, with Ryan. We'll try to figure out a time, and I don't think we're going to keep it to an hour. It'll probably be an hour and a half. But. Okay, all right. I think we're set. Ryan, you're going to give a little report, and you're going to introduce Kevin, as I understand, under your update. Is that correct?
Yep, I'd be happy to do that. I'm going to move through mine as fast as I can so that we can make sure we leave time for him. So my update, I just want to make everyone aware, we held a consultant open house on August 27th, where we shared upcoming project opportunities with over 100 members of the consultant community. And we're going to be having another event on October 14th, where we're teaming up with civil rights and having a doing business with ODOT that teaches folks about some of our procurement processes and upcoming projects for prospective construction industry partners. So that's an opportunity. If you'd like more information, John's your guy. He can get you some more detail on those. OR 294 still remains closed south of mile point 31. That's where we had the fire here in Clackamas County in our area. We've done most of the eminent hazard tree removal, but rocks and trees are still coming down, particularly from areas outside of the ODOT right of way. So that is going to take months and months to get all of that back together. But the good news is we have opened up, and so all of the residential communities now have access back to their areas. The places that are closed are mostly recreational areas. The Trunnion project is going very well. We had to delay it for a week because of a number of the folks who were evacuating and wanted to make sure that we had as much capacity as we could. So we delayed our project, but we opened it up ahead of schedule. The bi-state traffic management plan worked very well. We had zipper barrier on I-5, and we also had our bus on pilot shoulder in partnership with C-Tran across the Glen Jackson Bridge, and that worked extremely well. And just as a reminder, we're expecting to have an additional bus on shoulder pilot on I-5 in this area south of Nyberg in partnership with SMART starting next year. In Troutdale, we opened the Graham Road bridges. They look great, and it's sort of the last phase of a very, very long interchange improvement project that's gone on for over about 10 years, doing elements here and there. We also added some new bike ped infrastructure. Folks were crossing under there on a dirt path, and now they've got a great sidewalk connection. And then the last thing before we turn it over to them is I do want to share a quick video. We have now opened the first phase of Outer Powell from 122nd to 136th. This project's been a long time coming. We're very excited to have it open and serving the community. Why don't we go ahead and roll the video, and then I can wrap up and introduce Paul.
The Outer Powell Transportation Safety Project is constructing new sidewalks, bike lanes, center turn lanes. The goal of this project is to improve safety along Outer Powell and make it a safer and more comfortable place for people to travel.
We connected with a number of different community groups, area residences, and businesses to help create a safer Outer Powell for everyone. And we also had a community advisory group that really was critical in helping us understand the needs of the diverse residents of Outer Southeast Powell.
We're improving all the way from 99th to 174th, which is the dividing line between City of Portland and Gresham. There is a segment of that that's under construction right now and is representative of what you'll see along the rest of the corridor. It's also important to remember that a lot of freight does use this and travels along it. Any freight that travels along it today will be able to travel along it after these improvements are made as well.
We're just finishing up construction on Powell from 122nd to 136th. We've added new sidewalks, new safer crosswalks. We've installed rectangular rapid flash beacons, which alert drivers to people crossing the streets. We've got a mix of raised bike lanes, separated bike lanes. We reconstructed intersections at 122nd and 136th, and a center turn lane that extends the length of this corridor.
I'm Shannon Aiden, and I own Shannon's Childcare and Preschool right here on 129th and Powell, and we've been here about 35 years. We have 16 children coming and going daily. What it's done for us is allowed us to keep both of our driveways for the entrance and exit. It's just a lot easier for families to get in and out of here, and a lot safer, especially with the turn lane. The turn lane is probably the biggest improvement to our business and the most helpful thing that we've gotten out of it. When the project first started, we had a lot of access problems, and I just would go out and talk to the crew and tell them what I needed, and they were great. They plowed areas for us, and they made turn lanes, and they brought in barriers. They really were great.
Oh, it's so exciting. When I walk out on Powell, I want to tap dance. I'm so happy because now it's so easy to walk down the street, get to Safeway. It's just wonderful. It makes a big, big difference. I can tell people are moving more on the sidewalks. People are walking more being able to cross the street to take the bus, oh, it makes a big difference because now you know that you can cross in a safe manner. I think the proudest thing for me is that we worked together and that I came across people who had been working for 12 years to get this project going. And they motivated me and they inspired me. And that's the most important thing. It's going to be a beautiful boulevard, beautiful.
My name's Jim Chassie. I'm a neighborhood resident and an avid bike rider, and to see these improvements on Powell has been phenomenal to watch. One of the most important things is it gives us access to our business centers, which are kind of spread out. But once you have a safe bike network or walking network, then you can easily traverse a half mile to a mile to get to where you need to go, the groceries you need to buy, the services you need to get, all within the neighborhood. Now, hopefully, with this particular design, we'll be able to see more of the 8 through 80 age groups. ODOT was very helpful in setting us on a pathway to get a plan, fund the plan, and get it built. And that's what we did. We followed the steps, and here it is. And thanks to our state representatives who really came together and provided the funding for this particular project. I'm excited to get the rest of the plan rolling.
ODOT is designing the improvements for the rest of the project now through 2022. They will be consistent with the improvements that were just completed and were developed with input from the community. I'm so excited for the future day when everybody can use Outer Southeast Powell Boulevard safely.
So thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about that. It's a very exciting project, and there's an online open house for the remaining segments. If you want to participate in that, it's going to be open through October 18th. And with that, I do want to note that the Port of Hood River received a $5 million USDOT build grant to help leverage some of the funds that are already there. And we have Kevin Greenwood with us from the Port of Hood River to share a quick slideshow.
Great. Thank you for sharing some of your time tonight, Ryan. Appreciate it. Good evening, Chair Rogers and members of the commission. I feel a little bit like a wedding crasher, so I will try to make this brief, but absolutely huge thank you to the ACT and to the OTC for the support on our build application. I will touch base on that. I just want to give you a little bit later in the presentation, but would like to just kind of give you an update on the project. I'm going to go very quickly. The bridge was built in 1924 and is seeing some problems. We've been spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every year trying to maintain this bridge that's functionally obsolete. It's been a lot of problems. There's no bike ped path. There's no stormwater runoff collection. And there's been a lot of interest in seeing this bridge replaced. Common theme is the NEPA schedule. You see these a lot in these large projects. We're in the beginning of the fourth quarter. We're finishing the technical work. We anticipate publishing the supplemental draft EIS in mid-November. Of course, we're waiting for archaeological and did get the BA work. That's been accomplished. It'll be about a 3-year window for the construction of the bridge and a 3-year window for the demolition of the bridge. We are looking for creative ways to modernize our community meeting processes for current conditions. We do anticipate having a way to engage the public on that supplemental draft EIS in December. And then we're hoping for a final EIS and record of decision by July of next year. And really do want to thank Federal Highways. I know Phil Ditzler's not here. Both Federal Highways and ODOT are co-lead sponsors on this project, and we appreciate their support. The preliminary preferred alternative EC2 was determined back in 2008. This project's actually been going on since the late 90s. And if it wasn't for the House Bill 2017, we would probably still be waiting. But this has really allowed for us to get the NEPA process complete.
The EC2 alternative continues to be the community's preferred alternative. It's about 100 feet to the west of the current bridge, and would incorporate the roundabout according to WashDOT rules. We have received a preliminary Coast Guard determination for a higher navigational opening and a wider navigational opening. We do have some visualizations. That's part of the NEPA process. As you can see, the upper photo is of the current bridge and the lower is of the proposed bridge. Less total piers. It's a concrete segmental box. And this bridge would also have a bike ped path looking towards the west. I won't go into this detail, but we've been consulting very heavily with the tribes, which is always a critical thing to do with a project like this. Primarily at this point, as much as everybody loves NEPA, there's been a pent-up demand to kind of move past the NEPA and really look at what the governance of the new bridge would be. And so about 8-9 months ago, 6 local governments formed a bi-state working group, kind of an interim step to develop a joint work plan between the Oregon and Washington communities and determine the long-term governance structure, likely to be a bi-state bridge authority. And it's really been a way for them to advocate for the project. There was a study bill submitted for the 21 session, and we anticipate submitting formal language for a bridge authority for the Hood River White Salmon Bridge in 22. This is just showing post-NEPA phases and the work, everything from the governance evaluation, toll policies, engineering, considering P3s. So there's a lot of work to be done. But as Ryan noted, we were very successful on our bridge application, build application. It was a joint application with Klickitat County, which I think certainly helped our chances. It was one of only 10 planning grants awarded this year. Actually, they had never had planning grants in this program previously. There were a total of 655 applications and 70 awards. And so we feel very, very fortunate to keep this project going. And we anticipate that this will allow us to get 15% design complete, get the governance work ready to present to the legislature, and to produce some traffic and revenue studies. But Ryan, thank you so much to you and your team. I can't tell you how much your environmental team and Kristen Stallman, Jeff Buckland, you have some outstanding folks in Region 1. And I know that we, so far we're on budget and on time. And so thank you to your team for helping us get to this point. And with that, a big thank you. I appreciate I took 3 extra minutes, so I apologize. I'll try to give them back at the next meeting. Thank you.
Kevin?
Any questions?
I don't think so, Kevin, at this hour, but thank you for being so patient with us. We have some pretty packed agendas, and so we're delighted that you were here tonight to present a really successful and great project. So I appreciate that very much.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Just one piece of administrative business. I know we're almost at the bewitching hour. What I understood is going to happen is that we will write a letter, happy to sign that on your behalf, and you tell me if this is not what you want to do, asking the OTC, either one, to modify their date of meeting, which I suspect they'll say no, or to leave open the comment period, which they may or may not do. In lieu of that, I would propose that we meet probably on November the 23rd, which is a Monday night, which is right before Thanksgiving. But that's my thought. And we'll do, Steve, I understood what you were saying. Let's try to get them to do their part. But I always have a contingency in the back of my mind thinking if they say no, we need to have a planned meeting. So we'll meet, unless somebody really objects, let's take a look at November the 23rd. And then if they move, we'll cancel that meeting. So is that a fair analysis of where we're at and everybody is feeling that's appropriate? And you, Ryan, and Paul, we can all maybe chat in the next few days and get that letter shored up, as well as find out if that date is a consensus date for everybody. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, Roy, I like the idea of sending the letter, and I don't know if it'd be more impactful, the letter, if we were to all support that, or, you know, or have, you know, I'm not saying necessarily a vote, but, you know, thumbs up or down, but I think a letter's important. And so I think it's a good strategy. If they say no, we move it up, but it still doesn't give us the information I think that Mr. Finn's going to be providing on the 1st, unless he can move up his timeline.
Well, you pointed that out well. That's what I was saying in the first set of comments, is there's so much unknown at this point. I don't know how we're rushing into a decision without having information. But is there any naysayers if we follow that? And we're right at 7:30, so I'm trying to respect your time. But is everybody fine? I'm seeing lots of head nods. Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you for being tolerant and interesting. A lot of stuff going on in our county, and I know Clackamas and Multnomah County, you're all facing the same issues. Agendas that seem to go from morning to night. So we're doing our best. Well, thank you all. We'll adjourn the meeting. Bye.